Hi guys, DIY Mark. I wanted to share with you a project that's been on my to-do list for some time. I'm in the entry of our family room, and as you can see, there are a couple of steps down from the adjacent kitchen area. And before I finished this project, the steps were sometimes difficult to navigate because they were all the same color and the steps blended in with the surrounding flooring. The problem was made even worse at night when the room lights changed the shadows. So I have a two-prong approach to making these stairs a bit safer. First, I plan on installing an LED nightlight that will illuminate the steps. And secondly, I'm going to add a dark wood inlay to the middle step so you can more easily judge the depth of the steps. For the step lights, I'm going to add a junction box just above the tread molding. I begin by removing the stair baseboard and cut a small hole behind it to snake my camera in to see what obstructions need to be dealt with. The plan is to tap into the wall outlet just a few feet away. It will involve cutting a hole in the drywall for a remodel box and then drilling through some blocking to reach the wall outlet with my wire. To get started, I first will cut the nails holding the existing wall outlet junction box so I can pull it out and remove it. This is pretty easy with a metal cutting blade and my Sawzall, and squeezing it in between the studs and the box and cutting the nails securing the existing junction box. Next, after cutting the drywall for the step junction box, I can use a long drill bit to create a pull hole for the new wire. I fish a short piece of wire through the wall outlet and through the hole that I just drilled and out to the step box light. I found this LED night light which I'll use for the step light. It's a programmable unit that allows you to control the brightness and determine when it comes on. The options for these LEDs have improved so much over the last several years. This fixture was less than $20, and the features make it a perfect match for this application. I just make the connections to the new wire that I just fished, and then put the outlet back into its place. Once the night light is installed, I followed the instructions to program it for brightness and darkness sensitivity. After testing it a bit, the baseboard is reinstalled and caulked. This will be perfect for lighting the steps at night. No more stubbed toes. Now let's turn our attention to the inlay. The plan is to cut a shallow groove in the nose of the step and put in an exact size piece of walnut to fill the groove. The dark walnut will make it easier for your brain to determine the depth differences of the step. I start by making a jig for my router. The step is 40 inches wide, so that's how wide I'll make my jig. The base of the jig is 1/8 inch hardboard. Then I glue and nail 2 fences on each side of the jig the exact width of my plunge trim router base. Then plunge a slot through the hardboard base. Next, I rip an 1/8 inch thick walnut strip from a larger piece of stock. When cutting thin stock, I always cut on the outside of the blade and use this shop-made measuring tool to get exact thicknesses. It works really well. Before I start on the step, I first perfect my technique on some scrap. Here we have an old shop tabletop that I will use for practice. I set the router plunge the exact thickness of the walnut strip and then route my groove. After squaring up the ends of the groove with a chisel, the walnut fits perfectly. We are now ready to try my technique on the family room steps. I put a couple strips of double stick tape on the bottom of the jig and a couple clamps on the step nose. I want to maximize the length of the inlay, so I remove the router handles because they limit the travel by hitting the adjacent walls. I take my time and I route the groove. After the cut, I spend a few minutes with a small chisel squaring up the ends of the slot. Now I precisely measure the slot and cut my walnut to length. I want to dry fit the walnut before I glue it. Since it's such a tight fit, I place a couple pieces of dental floss into the groove before I stick the walnut in, so I can pull it back out of the slot. It's such a tight fit, without the floss, it would be nearly impossible to extract it without damage. After a bit of trial and error and a couple of small adjustments, I'm happy with the fit. Now I repeat the process, this time with some carpenter's glue in the slot. After the glue is dry, I tape off the area in preparation for some polyurethane finish. I use an oil-based semi-gloss that's slightly diluted with a bit of mineral spirits. This lets the finish flow nicely and dry quickly. I repeat this process for 3 coats. The results were so impressive that my wife convinced me to repeat the process with the upper step. And I must say she was right. Having both the top step and the middle step identified with the walnut strip really helps with depth perception. I'm very happy with the results. It's a small detail that will go largely unnoticed, but hopefully it will help someone avoid a misstep. Hopefully this project inspires you to tackle a similar project in your own house. And maybe you've even learned a new technique or two. I appreciate you taking the time to watch, and I hope you tune in again.